cell phone. I'm going to ask Mason to come up and do the introduction.
If you'll pray with me, please. Dear Lord, we thank you for all the good things you have bestowed upon us. We thank you for our club, these friends, and this meeting. We ask for peace and reconciliation in war-torn parts of the world. Protect those in harm's way. We ask you to look upon us and grant us your love, your mercy, and your wisdom and understanding. Forgive us for anything you have seen amiss in us today. Put into our hearts the ideal of service and make us mindful of the needs of others every day. Let us remember that when we serve others, we serve you. Bless and watch over those absent from us today, and bless this food to our use in us thy loving service. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Mason.
So proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Now let's recite the four-way test. Of the things we think, say, and do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you. Introduce the visiting here to us.
Thank you. We'd like to welcome all of our visiting visitors and visiting Rotarians today. And when I say your name, if you would stand up and wave to everybody so we can see your smiling face, that would be great. Kelly Augustine has brought with her Caroline Fawcett. Thank you for coming, Caroline. Glenn Matthews has brought Melanie Matthews. She's a visiting Rotarian. Margaret Clarkson has brought Jack Hodges. And John Bacchus has brought Betsy Bacchus. And Wade Carlisle brought his father, Mr. Carlisle. Graham has two visitors today. Actually, I think she has a few visitors. Chris White. And is it Stanley Pruitt? Pritchett. Stanley Pritchett. And of course, we have Congressman Joe Wilson visiting us today.
Thank you, Diana. We have a couple of housekeeping things. First thing is fireside chat is tonight at Lee Lincoln's house. It's 5 to 6:30. New members, I think everybody's confirmed that they're coming, that's going to come. And it's for current board members and past presidents. So if you haven't already confirmed you want to come, just if you let Brandon know. We're excited about it. It's going to be fun. And then Andy is going to come up and talk real briefly about the Bocce Bash, which is coming up soon.
Soon, as in 2 weeks soon, or less than 2 weeks soon. So we have done a great job so far of getting teams and raising raising money for, of course, ourselves and the Special Olympics, but, there's always a but. Hang on. But there's always a but. We're about 10 teams short of what we normally get. We normally are in the low 40s. We're about 33 teams at the moment. We could use another 10 teams. So if you're on the fence, or you know someone who's on the fence, get them off the fence, get yourself off the fence. Please, let's apply. This is obviously our big fundraiser. This is very important to, obviously, to raise money for our scholarships, to raise money for Special Olympics, but in the end, it's the idea of, hey, let's all participate, let's all try to get also the community to participate and engage with our club at the same time. So for instance, I was able to get my financial advisor, who I pay enough money already but she was really wonderful. The way I got her was she had a bocce ball trophy in her office, and I said, you play? And she said, yes, her family's coming. So if you, again, work out to some of those folks in your world, both at home, at work, at church, at wherever you do, please, let's try to get, again, at least 10 more teams as we approach until April 25th. And for those of you who have signed up, I look forward to seeing you out at Benedict. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you. I'm going to invite Wayne Cannon up to do Health and Happiness while Wayne's coming up here. Just please support Andy and us with Bocce Bass. It's really important. Like he said, it's the only fundraiser we do all year, so we would appreciate any support you can give us.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all of you who are members of the Rotary Club, because I think you are a part of one of the greatest organizations you can be a part of. When I get through with my short presentation here, he told me to keep it short, I'm going to tell you how we got to be the greatest and why we're the greatest when I get through. I've been a member of Rotary for 52 years. I had perfect attendance for 50 of those 52 years. This is just, I was introduced by, or recommended, sponsored by my partner, Dr. Clarence McEachin. Clarence was quite the Rotarian. He started off his career in West Columbia. He was president of that club. When he moved his practice to Columbia, he joined the Columbia Rotary Club. He then helped start the Breakfast Rotary Club, and became president of that club. We moved our practice out to Northeast. He joined the Spring Valley Club and became president of that club. So Clarence had quite the record of being supporting Rotary throughout the years. And let me tell you why I think Rotary is the greatest. Number one, when I grew up in the 50s, and during the 50s, the polio vaccine, of course, the polio disease was rampant in this country. And I have many, not many, but several friends who contracted polio and had some devastating conditions and sequelae from that particular disease. And Rotary took on the task of conquering polio. And they did it. We're down to just a couple of countries in the world now are affected by polio. The second thing is all is on your bowl bucket on the tables, all the Alzheimer's thing. I had a brother who had Alzheimer's and a sister who had Alzheimer's. You say, what happened to you? Well, some people think I got it now, but anyway. But they both smoked, and I never smoked. And I think that had a lot to do with that. The other thing is Rotary International. I don't know how many of you read the magazine. You know, one of the, I did Rotary, I did Health and Happiness for years and years and years and years. And one of my sticks, if you will, back in the old days, you know, when I joined the Rotary Club, we had over 300 members, and it was all guys. We didn't have women in those days, women, now they, you know, that's it. I don't know why, but it was just a man. Well, of course, none of the service organizations had women. It wasn't until the 70s and 80s that started in effect. That's pretty much the new concept. Anyway, I digress. We had a committee called the Journal Committee. And I was appointed chairman of that committee, and I started reading this magazine. And all of you get it, right? Everybody get this magazine if you're a member? How many of you read it? Anybody tell me the president of Rotary International? I'll tell you what, anybody tell me where the president of Rotary International is from?
Overseas.
Well, that was a good guess, and you're right. Anyway, he's from Italy, and doesn't matter anybody. You can look up his name; it's in the book. But the biggest thing about Rotary International is, you know, we've conquered polio, and now they're on a mission to conquer malaria. And malaria is a parasite, and it's much harder to get any kind of a medication that will absolutely kill the parasites. They're harder to kill than viruses. Anyway, they're on a mission to do this. So that's another good reason that we should be part of Rotary. Another thing we do in this club is we support our scholarship program. And it's a pretty healthy thing. It's $1,000 a year for these people. Isn't that right? Something like that. For 4 years.
5,000.
5? Yes. Okay. Thank you. And we support that program. And if you look at, read this book and find out what Rotary is doing, the book, magazine, internationally, you'd be surprised and absolutely proud of being an organization that is involved not only in our community, but worldwide. Worldwide, the Rotary International affects so many different areas. They've built homes for people. They've fed people. They've affected the world better than any other organization that I know of. And I could go on for a while longer, but he told me to keep it short. But anyway, I promise I could talk 30 more minutes. But I won't. What I'd like to just say, that the reason that Rotary is the greatest club that you could be a part of because of you and the members and the leaders that preceded us, that have led Rotary to where it is today, to be such an influence in the world. We also have 8 peace centers throughout the world. How many of you knew that? Located, and I would really recommend one more thing before I quit. Take this book. In this book, this magazine, there's 3 or 4 pages that tells you about Rotary clubs, how many Rotary clubs there are in the world, how many people there are in the world, what Rotary does, and it's in 3 pages, and you can really get a whole lot of knowledge in just a short period of time. If you don't do anything else with the magazine, at least read the pictures, or look at the pictures. I guarantee you, it will make you proud to be a Rotarian. Thank you.
50 years, that's amazing. So I'm going to read the card message. The term dementia and Alzheimer's are often used interchangeably, but they represent 2 different clinical concepts. One is a broad category, the other is a specific disease. Dementia is an umbrella term used to describe decline in memory, reasoning, or other thinking skills. Alzheimer's is one type of dementia, accounting for roughly 60% to 80% of all dementias. It was named for Dr. Alzheimer. He discovered the specific proteins in the brain associated with the disease. amyloid plaques, and tau tangles. As Rotarians, we're doing our part to raise funds for more research to prevent or cure Alzheimer's. Don't forget the blue buckets on your table and give generously. And please remember that we're matching points for the Rotary Foundation for Paul Harris Fellowship, $100 point per $100. Thanks, Lanier. And I'm going to turn it over to John Monk to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Dave. It's quite a crowd here today. Some of you may know that I've spent, I don't know, more than 20 or 30 years covering actions in court, state and federal court in South Carolina, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of lawyers and judges during that time. And I'm here to tell you that Eric Bland, our speaker, is one of the most formidable lawyers that I've seen in a South Carolina courtroom. He's smart, articulate, quick-minded, and often on the right side, fighting for underdogs against the rich and powerful. As a matter of fact, nowhere was that better illustrated when in 2021, Eric found himself representing two unknown nobodies against a rich and powerful lawyer from a powerful family named Alex Murdaugh in a $4 million insurance dispute. Nobody knew $4 million was at stake, even Eric, because Alex had kept it secret. The Alex representation of the two Satterfield brothers was the beginning of the unraveling of Alec Murdaugh's financial crimes, one of the most sensational criminal stories in America so far this century. I suspect Alec has a little bit to share on his role in that. Eric has been a commentator on hundreds of major network and cable news shows in the last hundreds of years, talking on just about every subject you can think of. And he now co-hosts a weekly podcast and a weekly YouTube show. And he and his partner, Ronnie Richter, have won more than $235 million in settlements and jury verdicts in trials around South Carolina and probably elsewhere. He has a biography. He's brought books over there. I wrote a book review on it. It's called Anything But Bland, and it's the great story of how he overcame obstacles, some in himself, because he was kind of a juvenile delinquent, in becoming very successful. And I ranked that biography up with one by Dawn Staley, who also wrote a compelling autobiography of how she rose from the projects to become America's greatest women's basketball coach. And you did bring some books along.
Yeah, I
Good to be over there, ladies and gentlemen. And if you want more details of his biography, Google Eric Bland, Eric spelled with a C and not a K, and South Carolina lawyer, and up will pop his law firm site. Now, of all his accomplishments, I think he'd tell you his maybe major accomplishment is his marriage and family. His wife, Renee, of 38 years, and his two children, adult children. One is in a surgical residency at medical school, and the other, Davis, is a financial analyst. And without further ado, I'm going to give you Eric Bland.
Thank you, John, for that warm introduction. I owe a lot of my career, believe it or not, to John Monk, because some of my cases have had notoriety, and John is the business reporter and legal reporter for the state paper, reported on a lot of my cases over the years. And I love speaking to Rotary groups. I love it because you give more of yourself back than you expect in return. You're all leaders. You bet on yourselves. One of the things that I talk about in my book is I don't like luck. I welcome it, but it's not something that I seek out. I seek out skill. And when I leave the house in the morning, my wife always says to me, good skill, not good luck. Because we're the difference makers. As John said, when I was a young kid, I was not headed on a good path. I grew up in Philadelphia. I was not a serious student. I was not associating with difference makers. I was with the wrong people. And the book that I wrote, Anything But Bland, a third of the book is about my journey, how I became kind of somewhat successful. I think I'm doing okay, but you know, I try to be humble. A third of the book is about the famous cases I've had. I've represented Ric Flair. I've been involved. I represented Michael Slager, who was the cop who chased down Walter Scott and killed him in North Charleston. That was a famous case. I've been involved in the James Brown case. I've had the largest verdict in the state's history in a legal malpractice case with my partner Ryan Richter against a very large law firm at the time, Nexus Pruitt. I've been involved suing Nancy Mace, but probably the most famous case I had was up until the Murdaugh case, was a case called Zachary Hammond. He was a 19-year-old kid in Seneca, South Carolina. It was at the time when we were having a lot of the Black Lives Matter cases that were national and international about police shooting African Americans. And I represented a 19-year-old kid who was selling one marijuana joint who he thought was selling to a friend. He dialed the person on the phone and the last number was wrong. It happened to be an undercover policeman. So they set up a sting operation at the Hardee's in Seneca, South Carolina. And he comes with his girlfriend and he's gonna sell one joint. And there's an undercover police officer who he starts to sell it to. And right when he does, a police officer comes flying in at about 55 miles an hour in SWAT gear. And he's a monster guy, much, much bigger than I am. I'm a small guy now, but I used to be a bigger guy. But he was a big guy on steroids. He comes in, he's going about 55 miles an hour, no identification. He's got paramilitary gear on, and he comes out and he pulls a gun. Zachary's in his car, and what a 19-year-old kid would do immediately is get scared and say, I'm getting the heck out of here. He puts the car in drive, and he's turning away from the officer. The officer goes up and says, I'm gonna effing kill you, and unloads his gun and shoots 3 times. Immediately, there's a press conference. The chief of police says it was a righteous shooting. The car was coming at the officer. He had no choice but to shoot him, and he shot him in the chest. I got a phone call that night. I went down to the coroner's office the next day, and Zachary was shot in his back. 2 of the shots hit him through the back. So that says he was moving away from the officer. And what you find in a lot of these small rural police departments are a lot of the officers wash down from bigger police departments, from the Greenville Police Department. They go to the Clemson, then they go to Clemson University, and then they got to Seneca. And this guy had said that he was going to kill somebody in a seminar that he was at. He said that I believe I'm going to shoot somebody before my career's over with. And so Zachary shot in the back. I take over the case, and I'm stunned that we're getting no press. Because at the time, there was so much press when we had these police shootings. And so at the time, I had relationships with John Monk. I had some relationships with the Greenville News. I had been on TV a couple times with Ric Flair. And I got on TV. I was fortunate enough to get on TV, and I said, you know, where's all the news? Where's all the people? You know, all lives matter. Not just black lives, white lives, yellow lives, everybody's brown lives, everybody's lives matter when a young kid is shot. And at that point, I realized how important the press was to cases of public importance. And that's why the Murdaugh case was so vitally important of getting the press involved. And I remember John wrote about the Hammond case and the Greenville News, and I started getting on TV, and I realized that the media can be a really good asset
for lawyers that have high-profile cases. They're not bad. If you're honest with them, they're honest in their reporting. If you tell them, hey, this is off the record, they honor it. They're honor. The media are honorable people and do a tremendous amount of service in our society, because the First Amendment, the freedom of the press, is number one. It's the number one most important amendment in our Constitution. And so I developed so many relationships through that case. I was on TV, I went on Anderson Cooper, Nancy Grace, any show that would let me speak about a 19-year-old kid getting shot in the back, and the narrative was that he was shot in the chest, it was important. And so pressure breaks pipes, pressure makes diamonds. And so I was on the TV every night during this case in 2016 and 17, and pressure broke the pipes, and we ended up settling the case for $2.2 million, which was $1,200,000 above the state cap. And so I knew, after having a career at that time, it was about 25 years, of suing lawyers, legal malpractice was a major portion of my practice. I believe that lawyers don't hold a special license, that they shouldn't be sued. We sue doctors, we sue bankers, we sue accountants, we sue architects. Lawyers put their legs on one pants at a time, and if they screw up, or they mistreat a client, or they steal from a client, they should answer for it. And so I did. It was not popular. It was not popular when I got the verdict of $5.5 million against Nexum Pruitt. It wasn't popular when I had another case against Nexum Pruitt and got a $3.5 million settlement. It wasn't popular when I started suing Nelson Mullins and Jones Day, the largest firm in the world, because if you make a mistake, you either should own it and be responsible for it, and if you're not, then we are a self-policing profession and we should police ourselves. And so I knew that if there was going to be a case involving lawyers stealing from clients, that most likely we would get the call. There was a lawyer named Cam Lewis, who was one of the best trial lawyers our state ever had. He was the forefather of suing lawyers. I followed in his footsteps. There's not too many people that would do it. You know, we all put ourselves in a position to have that one phone call made to us, whether it's going to be a big customer for a loan for David Reneker, or a big article that John Monk's going to write. We all want to be in that position. And so I knew the phone call was going to come in the Murdaugh case. I remember when the boat crash happened, and I said to my partner, Ronnie Richter, I said, we're going to get the phone call. And he said, what are you talking about? You know, Mallory Beach, this beautiful young girl, she was in the boat. Paul Murdaugh was driving, allegedly, the boat. They crashed and killed. And he said, it's a criminal case. You know, Paul's charged with DUI. Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin are involved. We're not going to get the phone call. I said, Ronnie, there's something about this case. There's something about the Murdaughs that is catching wildfire. Why do I say that? Because it was a 100-year dynasty of a family that controlled the solicitor's department in Hampton County. Hampton County is a judicial hellhole. It was voted the third worst judicial hellhole in the country in 2005 by the American Bar Association. Just below Harris County, Texas, Cook County, Illinois. For if you're going to get sued there, you're going to get slammed. And why do I say that? Because the Murdaugh firm controlled the court system there. Not only did Randolph and his father and the grandfather solicitors, but they had a private law firm too. So they controlled the criminal justice system and they controlled the civil justice system. And they did things that ingratiated themselves to the juror community. They did peak pickings for police twice a year, for the fire twice a year. They would send flowers to, God forbid, people's funerals. They would send gifts to kids who graduated from high school. Nothing wrong with that, but it lent a closeness, a connection that you have to make as attorneys to juries. They live in the community. Hampton County has not grown since the 80s. There's no industry there, it's law. And what they would do is they would sock CSX Railroad, because CSX Railroad went through Hampton County. And so the venue laws were, if you got in an accident anywhere in South Carolina and there was a connection or property in Hampton County, you can bring the case in Hampton County. And so lawyers would associate with the Murdaugh firm to get them to bring a case. And I told someone briefly earlier, I said, in a case that I have in Richland County that I could settle for $250,000 or $500,000, we'll settle for $5 million or $10 million in Hampton County. And when Alex Murdaugh and his firm stood before the jury, it was just cash register time. And what ended up happening is Walmart bought property in Hampton County, but they never opened a store because of all of the high jury verdicts and high settlements. We never heard of the Murdaugh firm in Richland County. We didn't see them. They never left Hampton County. You know, I practice in Greenville, I practice in Charleston, I have an office in Charleston, Richland County, Myrtle Beach. But these lawyers didn't have to leave Hampton County because they were getting multi-million dollars in settlements. And you would hear, you know, settlements of 10 million and verdicts of 25 million in rollover cases, really important cases. And so people started writing articles. John started writing articles about the Murdaugh family. My co-host, Mandy Matney, who at the time was with the Island Packet and then went to Fitz News, she started investigating it. And I remember, you know, we had Paul getting arraigned and he got special treatment. He didn't have to wear the prison garb and didn't get the perp walk. You know, was filmed in his sport coat as his mugshot. And then June of 2021 comes about. And Maggie and Paul are murdered. The wife and son of Alex Murdaugh. I mean, the craziest thing. I mean, spouses kill each other all the time. There's a fine line between love and hate. But parents never, rarely kill a child. That is the crossing of the Rubicon that, you know, society cannot tolerate. And I remember saying to Ronnie, hey, this is something's going to come from this. And he's like, what are you talking about? This is a murder case. Yes, I've done murder cases, and now I do a lot more criminal law than I did most of my career, which was business and legal malpractice. But I said, Ronnie, something's going to come of it. And then, darn it, if it didn't happen, on Labor Day weekend of 2021, the craziest thing happened. The roadside shooting. Alex claimed that he was going to go see his father or somebody in Charleston, and he was driving his Mercedes, happened to be the opposite way of Charleston, and somehow he got a flat tire, and he was changing the tire, and somebody came and took a shot at him, and he was almost killed. And then we hear about the next day, there's a press statement from his law firm that says, this is to announce that Alex Murdaugh has been terminated from the Murdaugh law firm. There has been some money missing. They don't tell you how much or whatever. And so I remember calling my partner Ryan on the phone that night, and I said, we're going to get the phone call. And on September 7th, that phone call came. It was the phone call that you all get in your respective businesses that I knew I was going to get. And Mark Tinsley, who represented the family of Mallory Beach, calls me on the phone and says, hey, Bo, hey, I got this call, you know, from Eric Harriet. He's the sister of the former housekeeper. I hate that word. Gloria Satterfield worked for the Murdaugh family for 30 years. He called and said there was an article in the paper that Mandy Matney wrote that said there was a $500,000 settlement. And he called me on the phone and said, we never got any money. The sons of Gloria, Tony Satterfield and Brian Harriet, Brian's a vulnerable adult, they never got any money. And he said, are you willing to talk to him? I said, hell yeah. It's funny, because I had sued Mark Tinsley earlier in my career, and he hated me. But we started to develop a healthy respect for each other. And I said, sure, I'll call him on the phone. And I remember calling my partner Ronnie, and I said, the phone call came. We got it. So Eric Carrier calls me on the phone and sends me this article that Mandy Matney wrote in the Island Packet News, where there was one document in the whole court file, not a complaint, no court orders, just one document that was a petition to get the court to approve a wrongful death settlement of $500,000 for Gloria Satterfield, the former housekeeper of Alex Myrtle. Now in South Carolina, if you have a wrongful death case, you got to get court approval for it. The court has to approve the settlement. And what happened? I read it, and Gloria Satterfield on February 2nd of 2018, on a Tuesday, was coming to the Myrtle house, quote unquote, to get her check. Why do I say quote unquote? Because if she was coming to work, it would be a workers' compensation case. But Alex said that she was coming on her day off to pick up her check. Therefore, it was outside of workers' comp. Supposedly, she was walking up the steps of Mizell, and I've walked those steps, very steep, brick-pointed steps. She's walking up, and Alex's dogs come to greet her, and supposedly she got pushed down the stairs by the dogs. Maggie comes outside, sees her at the bottom of the stairs. You probably saw it on some of the documentaries, on the Netflix stuff I was on, and all these other. You see her at the bottom of the stairs. Alex was called. They call Alex first before they call 911. Alex rushes home from downtown Hampton to Mizell, and supposedly he whispers in Gloria's ear and says, "What happened?" And she says, "The dogs caused my fall." He's the only one who heard it. So what ends up happening is she goes into a coma. 3 weeks she lives in a coma. She dies February 26, 2018. And at the funeral, Alex goes up to the family and says, "Hey, look, my dogs caused the fall. Just because somebody falls down your stairs doesn't mean you're liable. You have to have defective stairs or something that was a negligent act. You're not automatically liable just because somebody's always injured on your property, although you will get sued by most lawyers." So Alex goes up to the family and says, "Hey, my dogs caused the fall, and I got a massive homeowner's insurance policy, and I got an umbrella policy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you to a lawyer I know named Corey Fleming." He doesn't tell the lawyer, doesn't tell them that the lawyer's his best friend, doesn't tell him that he's the godson of his son Paul, godfather. He doesn't tell him that they were law school roommates. He doesn't say that they were best friends since kids. And he says, what Corey's going to do is he's going to write a letter to me and make a demand that my dogs caused the fall. And I'm going to turn it over to my homeowner's insurance company, and you know how much power I have in this county. And my insurance company either is going to settle, or I'm going to say, you're going to get sued, and I'm going to go before a jury in my Hampton County, and I'm going to tell them it's my fault. And hopefully we get enough money to pay for your mother's medical bills, which at the time were $600,000. And if there's a little something left over, it'll go to you, Tony, and you, Brian." They say, "Sure." They never meet Corey Fleming. They don't sign a fee agreement with Corey Fleming, a contingency fee where the lawyer only gets a recovery if he recovers money, has to be in writing and signed in South Carolina. No fee agreement. Corey never communicates with the sons or the family. Doesn't send them any letters, no emails, nothing. They think that Alex are their lawyers. The guy that's on the other side of the V, the defendant. So what ends up happening? Alex makes a claim against his homeowner's insurance policy. There's a $500,000 settlement. The kids are never told of that $500,000 settlement at all. Tony is appointed personal representative of the estate, but when the $500,000 hits, Alex goes to Tony, the son, and says, "You know, there's going to be a lot of money potentially coming down the road. I think we should name a banker as the personal representative." Why did he do that? So now Tony wouldn't have anything to do or any knowledge of the suit. And what ends up happening is $500,000 is recovered. If they would have just given $25,000 to each kid, I promise you, these kids would have thought they hung the moon. One's bags groceries and the other works as an orderly in a hospital. They stole all the $500,000. And so I talk to them on the phone, I get retained, I sign a contingency fee agreement. I think that there's only $500,000 missing. I'm not a guy that usually writes Hallmark greeting cards to people that I'm going to sue. If you get a letter from me, it's not nice. But in this case, I was skeptical that there was something more to the story, that the money's probably in an escrow account or they bought an annuity insurance policy. So I wrote a very benign letter. And I can tell you that if you're a lawyer and you get a letter from somebody who says you stole money or there's money not accounted for, whatever you're doing, you drop what you're doing and you answer that letter. I got crickets. It was a Friday afternoon. Alex's firm didn't respond. Corey Fleming's firm didn't respond. So Monday, I wrote the normal letter. They said, you got about 2 hours to tell me where this money is, or I'm going to the state bar. Crickets again. So the next day I filed a lawsuit. And I filed a suit because with a lawsuit you get subpoenas, subpoena power. I could serve discovery. And so I started subpoenaing records from Palmetto State Bank. I started subpoenaing from the accounting firm, from the law firm. And then Bank of America, where Alex was depositing these checks that he was stealing. And so I got on TV, I started using the relationships that I had from the Hammond case. I called John on the phone, and John is writing articles, and I'm like, look, everybody's talking about Maggie and Paul's murder. There was no arrest yet. Everybody's talking about the Labor Day roadside shooting. No arrest yet. Could be Cousin Eddie, could be the mob, whatever. Everybody's talking about the law firm firing Alex. But nobody was talking about the $500,000 was stolen from these kids who lost their mother, who worked for this family for 30 years. It got so absurd that the Bank of America foreclosed on Gloria's mobile home that was $17,000. Alex got the complaint, never answered it, never told the kids. The kids were pushed out on the street when the foreclosure happened. He could have written a check for $17,000. He had already stolen $500,000. So I thought. So I'm on TV and I'm screaming at SLED. Where are you? I got the check right here where he stole $500,000. And John's writing articles and I'm starting to go on Mandy Matthews' podcast that she had at the time, Myrtle and Murders podcast. And finally, on September 28th, I get a phone call from Chief Mark Keel who says, please stop. Please stop. Every night I was on Cuomo, I was on Aaron Burnett. He said, okay, I'll send 2 SLED officers to your office tomorrow. And I drove to Charleston, and 2 officers came in, and I showed them lock, stock, and smoke and barrel what had taken place. And during the time from when I filed the suit to the 28th, guess what? It wasn't $500,000. It was $4.3 million that they recovered in connection with Gloria's death. And Corey and Alex stole every single penny of that money. And so I teach SLED exactly what I uncovered for 5 hours, and the next day they criminally charge Alex with the theft of Gloria Satterfield. And why is that so important? It's so important because I knew that the financial crimes that he was committing was going to be the hub that ultimately would hold him responsible. Yes, everybody started speculating that he had something to do or knew what happened to Maggie and Paul. Yes, everybody saw the roadside shooting unraveling. Dick Harpootlian's getting on TV every chance he could get, saying that Alex is an opioid addict. Let me tell you something. Alex is no more an opioid addict than you or me. He had a problem with it. But if he took the amount of opioids that Dick Harpootlian said he took, it would kill an elephant. Alex never was arrested for DUI. Alex never missed court hearings. Alex wasn't reported to the bar. He didn't fall asleep in partner meetings. He didn't miss client meetings. Yes, he had an opioid problem, but Dick oversold it. And so what happened? We had the bond hearing in October, the first part of October. And I remember going to the courthouse, and there were cameras all lined up in the back. And they opened up the partition, and it was packed. And Alex comes out, and he's walking like this. First time he had ever been in jail. He had spent 5 days in jail. After they went and picked him up from when he was in a rehab facility, I think either in Georgia or Florida. And they brought him back, and they made him sit in the hot box for 5 days before they brought him in. And I never forgot, he comes out and he's looking around the courtroom. He's looking for his friends. He's looking for his family. He's looking for his law partners. No one was there. In fact, at the exact same time, John Marvin and his brother and Buster, his son, were gambling at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. And so Dick gets up after the charges are read by Creighton Waters, fabulous attorney. And by the way, Representative Wilson, your son was so instrumental in these prosecutions and did our state such a favor, Alan Wilson. So Alan Wilson, is there, and Creighton gets up and says, I think the bond should be $200,000. $200,000 for sealing. $4.3 million. And Dick Arpoulis goes, oh boy, that's crazy. It should be $50,000. Well, then I got up and I got to speak on behalf of the victims. And I said, Judge Newman says to me, well, what do you think, Mr. Bland? And I said, well, I think he's disgraced our state. I think we've been mocked across the country. But most importantly, he's disgraced the profession that I love. Because lawyers can do 100 good deeds, 1,000 good deeds, 1,000 good results for clients. But one guy like Alex Myrtle that steals money like that can kill my profession forever. We're already behind the 8 ball. We're already known as being, less than stellar sometimes. That we protect each other, that we finagle money, yada, yada, yada. All the canards that have existed. And I said, Judge, he should not get bond. If he is the addict that Mr. Harpootlian says he is, then he needs to drink from the same cup of justice that we all do. And that's the name of my podcast. It became Cup of Justice. I said, he needs to drink from the same cup of justice. He needs to be incarcerated. Because if he's not, he can further harm people. And if he's such an opioid addict, then he could harm himself or others. And damn it, if Judge Newman didn't deny him bond. He denied him bond. And from that day forward, Alex Murdaugh has never had a breath of fresh air. And so after that, we sued. We sued the law firm, we sued the banks, and I recovered $9.2 million for the Satterfield boys. And then I got on TV and I said, if there are other victims that have information, and I'm allowed to do that under the pretrial publicity rules, come forward. 5 more people came to us that Alex had stolen money from. And we recovered another $5 million. And then Mark Tinsley represented the Beach family. And Justin Bamberg, another justice warrior, represented the Pickney family that Alex stole money from. And so over the course of 15 years, Alex stole over $19 million from clients. And how could the law firm not know that? They have a CFO, they have an accounting department. Money comes in, you have to account for it. And what ended up happening is, I got the FBI involved, because I was saying, where's the FBI? These are interstate crimes. We got wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. I got the FBI involved. And so then he was charged on a federal level. And so I knew that these financial crimes were going to be so vitally important to hold him accountable. And he was held accountable. What happened? He got 27 years when he pled guilty for the Satterfield crime. He has to do 23. He's 56 years old or thereabouts. He's got to do it in maximum security prison. general population, food's bad, healthcare's bad, your life is at risk every single day from bad people. But then he also pled guilty in front of Judge Gergel in Charleston for the federal crimes. And lo and behold, he thought he was going to get some kind of consecutive sentence or some kind of lighter sentence because he had already pled guilty in state court. Judge Gergel gave him 40 years. No parole in the federal prison system. He gets some good time credits. So Alex, if he lives to be 79, walks out of state prison, walks across the street to federal prison, and he's got to do another 35 years. So what happened? Well, lo and behold, the murder charges come. While I'm doing all this with my partner on the financial crimes, and Justin Bamberg's doing his dizzle on the financial crimes, Alex is charged with the murder of his son and his wife. You can't make this up. John Grisham can come to South Carolina. He doesn't have to write fiction. He just be a beat reporter like John Monk and write nonfiction. I mean, it's got murder, it's got dynasty, it's got money, it's got drugs, it's got affairs, it's got you name it. So I started being a spokesperson informally for Alan Wilson and Creighton Woodard, my good friend. And I was getting on TV saying, there's overwhelming circumstantial evidence that this guy did these crimes. No, there's not a video of him holding the gun and killing Maggie and killing Paul. And so I was going on TV every night and battling Mark Garagos, who was a good friend to Dick Harpootlian. He represented Michael Jackson and a lot of other famous people. And Alan Dershowitz, the Harvard trained lawyer. I was battling him every night. And Alan and Creighton were saying to me, keep doing it. Keep doing what you're doing. Because Dick had so many people out there on TV that were saying, oh, the case is weak, it's circumstantial evidence, they don't have any evidence against Alex. Oh, really? No evidence against Alex? What about the video in the dog kennel? 2 minutes before Maggie and Paul are killed, and he's on video. He had told the world, the police, even his only living son, I wasn't at the kennels. I was asleep in the house. Then we have the Snapchat video of him in a blue shirt and khaki pants at 7:30. Now he's changed. What do we have? At 9 o'clock at night, he leaves and he doesn't even go to the kennels to tell his wife and his kid that he's going to go see his mother. What else do we have? I'll tell you what we have. Supposedly there's 2 executioners that came, 2 shooters that came on the property. What executioners do you know, folks, who come to a rural property in the South, dark of night, with pit bulls and other dogs and everything, without guns? And the plan's going to be, we're going to break into the house of the people that are on that property, steal their guns, and then go kill their wife and son. Doesn't make any sense. What else didn't make any sense to me? At 10 o'clock, when the police come after Alex comes home and sees his wife shot, sees his son, God forbid, head blown off, Alex is sitting there in a pristine white t-shirt and khaki shorts. Not a stitch of blood on him, no dirt. I can tell you, if my wife and my son were laying there, the first thing I would be doing is squeezing them, saying, Lord, breathe life back into them. I'd have blood and everything on all my shirt. What else did he do? He didn't call his only living son Buster for 42 minutes. He starts text messaging on the text stream about a good-looking woman. What else does he do? He searches for a restaurant on his phone. He waits 42 minutes to call his only living son, and guess what he says? Come home, Buster. Unfortunately, your mom and son obviously were shot and killed. If somebody's out there trying to kill your family, you're not telling your son to come home. You're telling your son to go to the police department. Be safe. Don't come home. In 102 jailhouse phone calls that were recorded, guess what you never hear Alex say? I'm innocent. Who's trying to find the killers? What's he talking about? Gamecock football. Hunting, telling Buster to go put out corn for deer, talking about Buster getting back into law school after he was dismissed for plagiarism. There is so much evidence of Alex Murdaugh's guilt that even when this case most likely is going to be sent back for a new trial, because of the arguments we heard in February at the Supreme Court, very surprising, and I'll talk about that real quickly. I know I got to finish soon. When that case comes back, even if they don't let in the financial crimes of all the money he stole, which was one of the motives of the murder that the state posited, even if they got to go on the raw circumstantial evidence, I believe he will be convicted. At worst, a hung jury. There may be one or two jurors who will say that there's reasonable doubt. That's why the financial crimes were so important for me. Because even if the case gets reversed, and I want you to report, you need to ask all three Attorney General candidates, if this case goes back for a new trial, are they going to try it? Stephen Goldfinch already called me on the phone and said yes, because I put this out publicly. But David Pasco is so vitally close to Dick Harpootlian. He's a protege of Dick. He changed parties to the Democratic to the Republican Party. David Pasco needs to answer, if I win this race, am I going to bring that murder charge for a new trial? Because justice deserves to be chased. Justice deserves to be cherished. And we need justice for Maggie and Paul. And so what ended up happening, we get the conviction. Life is, goes on. And lo and behold, we get Dick Harpootlian who says, hey, we've talked to some of the jurors, and we have allegations that the clerk of court, Becky Hill, interfered with the jury's deliberations, which is very serious. The reason we have the greatest justice system in the world, it works for the worst of us, not just the best of us. It works equally. And Alex is entitled to a fair trial. Do I believe that Becky Hill interfered with those jurors? Absolutely not. I represented 6 of those jurors who rendered a verdict. They said they never heard her ever say anything to us, nothing about a suggestion of testimony by Alex or a verdict or anything. And besides, it was our verdict of our own free will and accord. Nothing that was said had anything to do with our verdict except the testimony, the evidence, and the jury charges by Judge Newman. And so Justice Toll, and I'm almost finished, Justice Toll held that the verdict was good, that it should be reversed for a new trial. They couldn't prove under the standard, the state standard that she applied, that not only was there juror interference by Becky Hill, but that it affected the verdict. Look, Becky Hill abused her office. She was ran out on a rail, disgraced her office. She abused the trust of the people. But it didn't have anything to do with it. And so when this case went up to the Supreme Court, everybody thought, there's no way they're going to reverse the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. But when you heard those oral arguments, not only were they really skeptical of what Justice Toll did in that hearing, but they were even skeptical of Judge Newman for letting in the financial crimes. So I always thought that Alex was going to get a new trial once it got to the federal level, once he went through all the state. But I think there's going to be a reversal by the Supreme Court. Could be a 5-0 vote, maybe a 4-1. And so the question is going to be, what's the next Attorney General going to do? Are they going to retry him for murder? I think we have to. I think our state did an unbelievable job. We weren't a circus. We weren't the OJ circus. Judge Newman was not like Lance Ito or all these other judges who try to be famous. But I believe that we accorded ourselves well as a state. We went after Alex. We convicted him. We convicted Corey Fleming of his financial crimes. We convicted Russell Lafitte. He's now pled guilty. He was the president of Palmetto State Bank. But there were a lot of other people, folks, over the last 16, 20 years who knew what Alex was doing. And they have not been prosecuted. And they have not been investigated by our OPC. So when it was all over, I wrote a book. The book is Anything But Bland. It tells the story of the Murdaugh trial in the last third of the book. John wrote a very nice article about it.
in the state paper. And I have some books for sale. I'll sign them and inscribe them. And just really grateful that you would listen to me ramble on about this. And I appreciate it very much.
So we're gonna skip this meeting at the end today. And Eric said he'd be happy to stick around and answer questions, so feel free to ask questions. Next week's speaker is Ellen Weaver from the Department of Education, Superintendent of Department of Education. Y'all have a great evening.